My name is Professor Tommy Demos, and today I will be demonstrating the Puppet tool. The first step is to, of course, open the existing starter project, which in this case should be located on your drive. Okay, so you have a DIG folder, and you've got exercise files, okay. And we're going to look in the Chapter 5 and pull up Puppet Animation. So there's an existing starter project for this. It's called Puppet Animation. I'm going to push open. We get this warning. Of course, it's telling us that this is an old After Effects project file and it needs to convert it to be able to open it. And we get this duck AI. And notice a .ai is an Adobe Illustrator file, which is a vector file. So what's interesting about a vector file is that I can scale it up as much as I want and I get no loss of quality whatsoever because it's actually just math. When you work with a JPEG and you scale things up, you are using what's called a rasterized file, and it necessarily is pixelated. So you can scale it all you want, and the more you scale it, the more pixelated it becomes. So if you ever want to work with something that is impervious to scaling, you need to use a vector file. And one of the most common ones is the Adobe Illustrator file, like this duck here. It's a .ai. There's a misconception that extensions need to have, a certain number of letters. That's not true. Extensions can have any number of letters. I've seen 2, like AI. I've seen 3, like a document, a DOC. I've seen 4, like a DOCX or an AIFF. And then look at Premiere Pro project files. Those are 6. So PROJ. So that dot and then the extension, those other letters, indicate the container file, which is suggestive of a format, but not directly related to a format. It's more related to the container. It's the wrapper, WRAPPER, that contains the material. So this duck image is a vector art. Now, this is a single layer. There's no moving parts to this duck, okay? But the Puppet Pin tool allows us to do some amazing things. So up in the top left corner is a Puppet Pin tool icon. Notice that the shortcut for that is Command P, and also notice that there are more than one Puppet Pin tool. There's a Puppet Pin, there's a Puppet Starch, and there's a Puppet Overlap. So what happened is this person who started this project already added these Puppet Pins, so the Puppet Pins exist. And if I scroll down and notice that inside of the Illustrator file, there is already a series of Puppet Pins. I'm going to select each one at a time so you can see where they exist. So there's Puppet Pin 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. So essentially what happens with these Puppet Pins is that they become an anchor point that you can stretch from. So you could make this duck waddle its butt up and down like this. You could make it move its feet. Okay, and notice that whenever we move stuff, it happens at the point of the puppet pin, and then the rest of the pins are static. So it sort of moves everything around just that particular pin. So what's interesting about this, because you could do like a sort of stop motion animation where you grab this pin and you move it and then you move forward in time. And then you grab the next pin and move it and move forward in time. And notice that when we do this sort of thing, it starts to create these keyframes. I'll just keep doing things just so you can see that it moves over time. This is not going to be a realistic movement at all. It's just to demonstrate what's happening here. So I'll go ahead and play it, and you can see that the duck is moving over time. That's just because these stopwatches have already been turned on. Okay, so because the stopwatches are turned on, if I move the position of each of these puppet pins and then move the playhead, we get keyframes added automatically. But that isn't necessarily the fastest way to do it. So I'm going to close the project and reopen it because I want to undo all that stuff. So we're back to normal here. I'm going to go back to puppet pin number 1. Now, I'm going to hold down Command and start to move the duck. And you can see this outline here. And I want you to notice that there's a stopwatch and that the playhead started moving the timeline, right? And then if I let go, you'll notice that it started to copy my movement over time. So what's interesting about this is kind of like motion sketch if you think about it. So if I select that particular pin and do this process, you'll notice that it moves over time to follow my mouse. Now let's try it with a different one. Let's try puppet pin 2. So we'll do the same thing, hold Command, and notice that the head is still moving, and I'm sort of following it now with my cursor. You see what happened there? Let's play it back. Okay, let's do it again. Go to the beginning. We're going to choose puppet pin number 3 this time, which is a foot, or maybe we'll do number 4, 5, number 5. We'll go in order here. So number 5, put the play at the beginning, hold Command, and so you can see what's happening with the rest of the outline of the duck, so you can sort of follow it a little bit. See what's happening? So now it becomes a little more realistic in its movement because you have some perspective. You have some relationship between the puppet pins in real time. So let's also do the butt. So we'll find that pin. It's number 6. Hold Command down and see what's happening. Play it back. Okay, it's starting to look more alive. So it's recording that. So the key is you hold down Command, you drag the puppet pin, and then it moves. So if you want to further play with your puppet, there's a couple of interesting things here. The starch tool allows you to actually create areas that don't move. So what it does is it allows you to sort of put a stop pin in place to keep areas of the duck from moving while the rest of it does move. So this is called the starch tool. I don't know if you guys are familiar with starch. Starch is essentially like this spray that you put on your clothes when you iron them to stiffen the shirt. Have you ever done that? I don't know if you've ever ironed without starch, but it's horrible. It doesn't work. So you have your iron, you have your ironing board, and you've got maybe some water, and you're trying to get the wrinkles out, and they don't come out easy. The starch spray is a digital form of that starch for your puppet so that it keeps it from moving. It's like it flattens it. Okay. So to do that, you simply drop these pins and then increase the extent. And now those regions are impervious to movement in relationship to the puppet pins. So it keeps things from moving. The other tool that you can play with is the puppet overlap tool, which allows you to place this beak in front of or behind the duck's own neck. Okay, so these are just other tools that you can play with if you want. The puppet pin tool adds puppet pins. Puppet starch allows you to make regions impervious to movement, and puppet overlap allows you to place certain parts of the puppet in front of itself or behind itself, and you can play with those parameters to see how they work. Okay, so this is a very important project because in your upcoming practicum, you're going to be required to use the puppet tool in some way. So you're going to have to download a graphic from the internet and then use the puppet tool to animate the thing. So that's part of the requirement for the first practicum. Okay, so we'll save it, save as. We're going to go to on your hard drive, DIG, in class. We're going to call this last name, first initial, underscore E9 underscore puppet tool. Push save. All I want you to do for this project is make the duck move. Animate it. Practice the thing where you grab the puppet pin with holding command down and just animate the duck. That'll get you used to it. Also, you need to export that as a movie file. So we'll go to File, Export. Make sure that you're in this Start comp down here. So File, Export, Add to Render Queue. Lossless is bad news. Change that lossless to something else. Lossless is associated with animation. We're going to choose Format Options and choose any Apple ProRes codec. It'll work. I'll just pick Apple ProRes 422 Proxy because I don't need a super high quality file here. And I'll push OK. I'll push OK again. I'll click on Output to. This is a good place to put it right next to its project file. I'll populate the name by clicking the original project file name. This is going to be a QuickTime movie, and I'm going to hit save and render. Now, when you open this this duck project, I want you to be aware that there's also a final project. This one has a pretty realistic motion in it. You can see that the duck doesn't move that much. If you want to see how they did that, you can push U. U shows you all the keyframes that have been animated. So guess what happened? They only animated puppet pin number 1. That's it. You can tell by looking at the timeline down here. So the rest of the movement that you're seeing in the duck is the result of the spread of that movement from the beak, because puppet pin 1 is the beak. So be aware that you may not have to animate all of your puppet pins in order to make the thing move. But adding puppet pins gives it anchor points from which movement is derived. Okay? Also, you'll notice that they used this tool, the puppet overlap tool, to get that beak behind itself. That's how you do that. So play with that and see if you can get the puppet beak in front and behind the body. All right, so that's the final one, just so you can look at it. Here's the one that we messed with. So you don't necessarily need to move all the pins. It begins to look a little bit comical when you do that.